All right, we are live. Welcome everyone to the South Star Classroom, episode 186. We are slowly creeping towards 200. Can you believe it? Thanks for being here today. We've got an exciting show for everyone. We have a couple of guests that we'll get into here in a second. And I think what could be described as a very relevant and timely topic. I think especially in talking about some of the federal cuts to social emotional, behavioral health in our school systems from the Trump administration. But we'll get there when we get there. Let's go ahead and check in. I know that Mr. Omar Yanar is away on business and pleasure, hunting wild animals somewhere in another continent, right? He's doing something. We're really not sure what he's doing, but he's in an undisclosed location, and he'll be back in a couple of weeks. And we believe Dr. Cole will be joining us here at some point during the show. So let's go ahead and do our check-in. Since it's you and me, Jubilee, we can take a little bit of time to do authentic human connection check-ins.
Yay! Today is Tuesday. It has already been a long week. And but I'm doing all right. Spring is fighting back, so we're having some more consistent warmth. There are about 40 plus days left to the school year, and I'm excited about like what the summer will bring. But I'm really doing good. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome.
How do you do?
Good. I'm good. We have this kind of like funky early May weather pattern, which I'm pretty much over. Like it's rained the last couple of days. And so we are hopefully looking at some warmer weather in the next couple of days. So that's good. And then, it's like baseball season. So we're kind of every year slowly getting more into, professional baseball. And we've been in San Diego now for going on 4 years. So, ramping up our San Diego Padres engine here. We're playing the Yankees again tonight. And so, it feels, it's so American, right? Baseball and beer and hot dogs and, the Star Spangled Banner and the Pledge of Allegiance, all those things, right?
Yes. Yes. I'm going to be singing the Star Spangled Banner in my city on June 7th. I'm going to be singing the Star Spangled Banner. It's like a Bowie Fest or it's like a festival. And then I'm going to be hosting the Juneteenth festival. I'm very happy. I auditioned and I got it. So very happy about that.
Yeah. Nicole's right there. No rain, no harvest. That's right.
Indeed.
Especially down here, we don't get enough rain. So I should not be complaining. We'll take the late rain. That's for sure.
Yes.
All right. Let me do a quick administrative thing here. Let's see. Okay. I'm chatting with the interns, the people that help produce our show on the back end.
Yeah. Thank you, Niall.
Letting them know what's going on here. Okay. So today's show, we are going to be talking about the crisis of boys, the crisis of young men. Is there a crisis? Is there not a crisis? I have recently been picking up a few new podcast subscriptions, and interestingly enough, for a number of different reasons, the governor of California, fourth largest economy in the world, just moved up from 5, has started his own new podcast, and I think it's called "This Is Gavin" or something like that. Huh. And he had a guest on his show. I think he's a New York Times writer. His name is Scott Galloway. Don't know much about the guy, but they had a very interesting show about talking about young men. I think in the larger, broader, group of young men, they didn't really get down to the, nuts and bolts of, Latino, brown, African-American, Black young men. But they did talk about, some of the trends that are that we're seeing emerge coming out of the pandemic around young men and boys and men in general. And some of it's quite alarming. So I think buckle up. We're going to talk about that for a minute. And then we're going to go a little bit deeper and look at, what that what those potential, what the potential risks are for specifically looking at like Black and brown boys and young men.
Mm-hmm.
So we will get into it. But first, I wanted to welcome to the stage. We have two special guests that are going to liven up our conversation today from their various perspectives, and we'll go one at a time here. I wanted to welcome, or would you like to introduce your friend, your associate?
Absolutely. I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Nadia Lopez, an award-winning educator, author, and thought leader committed to transforming the landscape of education and empowering communities. She is the visionary founder of Mott Hall Bridges Academy in Brooklyn, New York. So you already know it's about to be a good problem, some good trouble, okay? Because that's my city. So she gains international acclaim for her innovative approach to leadership and her dedication to closing the educational equity gap for underrepresented students. Her groundbreaking work was spotlighted through the Humans of New York series, capturing global attention and leading to a White House invitation and recognition by various prominent organizations. Y'all, she was up there with our forever First Lady, okay? And Obama, she was up there at Black Girls Rock, okay? So she is a sought-after speaker and consultant. She shares her expertise on leadership, resilience, and innovation in education. She has a TED Talk out, y'all. It's called Why Open a School to Close a Prison? And it has inspired millions to rethink the role of education in shaping society. She's the author of a few books, right? Bridge to Brilliance, which is a memoir that chronicles her journey as an educator and underscores the transformative power of education. And now she is the Chief Impact Officer for College and Community Fellowship. She now spearheads initiatives to support justice-involved women in pursuing higher education and breaking cycles of poverty. Beyond her professional accolades, Dr. Lopez is a passionate advocate for self-care and wellness, having shared her personal journey of overcoming stress-induced health challenges. Her story is a powerful testament to the importance of prioritizing mental and physical health in high-pressure environments. Dr. Lopez continues to inspire educators, leaders, and change makers, and parents, and brothers, and sisters, and nephews worldwide to reimagine what is possible when we invest in people, in purpose, and in potential. We welcome to the South Star Classroom, Dr. Nadia Lopez.
All right. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm going to clap it up because, sometimes it's hard to hear all of that, but I'm going to embrace that. That's the work. Yes.
Indeed. That's why I read all of it. I said, she's going to get all her flowers today, honey. Okay. Yes.
Thank you.
Fantastic. All right. And our second guest is coming to us from, I believe, Minneapolis, Chris Stewart. And I'm going to go ahead and give Mr. Stewart here a quick opening, and then he can feel free to add on. But he's been on the show before. He's also one of the co-founders of the 8 Black Hands podcast. Let's see, Mr. Chris Stewart, currently the CEO at Brightbeam Education. You also served as a elected member of the Minneapolis School Board years ago, and the 2014 Bush Foundation Fellow, as well as a 2019 Aspen Pahara Fellow, and so many other accolades. We don't have time for all of that. Welcome, brother Chris Stewart. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Awesome.
All right.
Glad to have you.
Well, let us go ahead and dive in. So again, just to recap very briefly, today we're going to be talking about, I'm going to share some data with the audience as well as the our guests and with on the show, and then we're going to dive into a conversation about the crisis of young men and boys. Is there a crisis? Is there not? And we'll get into it. All right. So starting out with some, let me get this going here real quick. All right. So starting out with education, we know at a very high level in higher education, men tend to be underrepresented in our institutions of higher education. I think women now earning something about 60% of college degrees. So you can imagine 60 to 40, right? We also know when we talk about mental health challenges, and right now just talking at the macro level about men in general, men are 4 times more likely to die by suicide than women. That was a pretty stark statistic there around mental health in men. Social isolation is another area that, we kind of want to dig into today, especially coming out of the pandemic. A significant number of young men report feelings of loneliness and a lack of close friendships, leading to increased vulnerabilities that can sometimes tend to lead to mental health issues. Also thinking about, economics and work and income. Current economic shifts have reduced male-dominated blue-collar job opportunities, leaving many young men adrift. So I think the big picture here, before we dive into the specifics around Black and brown men, are things have definitely shifted over the course of the last 5 to 10 to 15 years around men. And so, some people can say, well, it's a leveling. Other people can say, we're headed towards a potential crisis. For me, when I see the suicide statistics, the higher ed kind of doesn't necessarily stick out too much to me. But I know that underneath that, men are much more less likely to actually access mental health services, which lead to other problems down the road. And so before we get into the impact on our Black and brown communities, I wanted to just open it up for you in general. Like, what are you all hearing around, the experience of young men and boys? What is your experience at working with or raising young men and boys? I think we all kind of come at this from a different angle. And I wanted to start with either one of our guests first and jump in.
So I wanted to defer to Chris only out of respect of the fact that we're having a conversation of Black and brown boys, and it's important to hear from the male perspective. And I'm all about sharing my experience and what I've done as an educator and what I've seen. But I do want to, if that's okay, Chris, to defer to you first.
I was about to say the same thing to you. I'm a good doctor and author. So I heard you mention Scott Galloway earlier, and he's making the circuit the rounds with this message that boys have become dislocated because we left them behind, because they are alienated because of things that we have done, because of the economy, because of things like NAFTA, and just a host of other reasons. But every time I hear him speak, I know that he's not talking about boys of color. I know he's talking about the recent emergence of dissatisfaction among white boys, right? Because Black boys have been in a state of something that could be called near crisis for years, right? That's not new to us. But there are a few things that I think we should pay attention to. In my lifetime, people stopped joining things. People stopped being involved. This is all the Robert Putnam stuff. They stopped being involved in things that kept them socially adhered to each other. I have a pastor who says to me that community is the way people act when they feel like they belong together. Well, we split up the things that many people felt like they belonged to. And I'll just give you a couple of just small, silly things within education. One of them is we made it harder and harder and harder just to play sports in school, for instance. It got more expensive. It got more, the buses were cut, that if you were going to stay after school and you were being bused to a school, it was harder for you to participate. All of those things were character building things that actually kept people together. They felt like they belonged together. So this whole loneliness thing and whatever, who the least lonely people are? It's the kids that actually are involved in things that keep them attached to other people, right? And we continuously cut the pathways to those things for young people. And because of capitalism, things are becoming very expensive. Part of the American things that, I would have been used to as a kid just are out of reach now, right? The idea that someone would have taken me to a baseball game or a football game or whatnot was within reach. My parents. I have several kids right now. That is not in reach anymore. That is, I'm sorry, we're not going to do that too often. I can point to a lot of the things that are more recent, like the pandemic and social media and all of that stuff, but this has been happening for a long time. this idea that we have been disinvesting in joining in institutions that keep us together. Church participation has gone down. We know kids that actually participate in church have higher academic outcomes, better academic outcomes. If they go once a week, they have better outcomes. If they go twice a week, they have much better outcomes. The dearth of Black teachers, right? If we're talking about Black boys specifically, there's a difference between those that are in care of a Black veteran educator and those who are not. You can just see statistically. I'm not trying to make a provocative point. That's empirically true, right? Your life gets better as a Black boy if you have at least 2 Black teachers in your school career. The number of schools that don't have a single teacher of color is outrageous, right? Like it's something like 40 or 50%. My good brother Sharif El-Mekki tells me all the time. So I don't know that I have a coherent one thing that you can point to, but there has been a conspiracy over time in many different areas. It's the things that we used to participate in that cost more money now. It's the way that schools have cut off pathways to extracurriculars and things that used to keep us together and create community. It's the way that housing policies and urban policies have scattered us and took away what used to be in some cases very thriving communities. I actually was in Gary, Indiana not long ago, and man, I had never been there before. And I could just tell you, if you haven't been to Gary, Indiana, it's a little bit of it's a picture of what used to be. There was a lot of social capital there amongst the Black folks that now is deteriorating, and the kids growing up there now don't have the same life that their parents had.
So if I can add, first thing that came to mind is we need to define and recognize that there's a change in what community looks like now versus when we were growing up. You come of a certain age, and regardless of when we talk about the dynamics of families, that hasn't changed, right, at all. There's still single mothers out here making a way, but there was a community that surrounded the children, right? There was an affinity to have mentorship that just happened in the parks, right? When young people would gather and they would play basketball, the older guys would look out for the younger guys. Back in the day, you would go to the barbershop. The barbershop was just a place of learning from the elders. Even as a girl, I used to, hang out and be around the barbershops because the conversations that they would have, whether it was talking about sports, whether it was talking about politics, whether it was talking about history, there was an exchange that happened naturally. And we used to hang out on the corners without the stop and frisk, without feeling like we were being policed and then being told that we can no longer gather, right? So there has been a change in how we interact with one another, especially when it comes to our young men. It's not that they feel like there's a safe space for themselves to be seen, to be heard, to be honored, right? And to the point of, we had schools that were invested in the community as well. There's such a high turnover of what's happening in our community as far as the teachers. Like when we were growing up, you knew who your 5th, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade teacher was going to be. It was just kind of a rites of passage. You wanted to be in this person's class. You wanted to know, who was coming next, because that person was just as invested, whether they were Black or white. It didn't even matter. They were invested. Gentrification has also changed how our communities interact. So I did read, the author, like the writer that you were talking about, a lot of his stuff. And I just felt like, you're not talking about our boys. He does make mention at one point about New York City Men's Teach, right, as being a point of bringing Black educators, specifically males, into the classroom. But I'm like, it's much deeper than that. There is a divestment in our programs. Our young people are being recruited by gangs heavily. Before there was a time of, you can't touch that one. That one over there, you can't touch them. They're like, no, we're going to get them all, right? There's so much that's happening. And you have an education system filled with new educators who don't know the dynamics, who are not invested, who, if they hear something that seems like a concern, rather than talk to the child, rather than understand the community, rather than speak to someone who may be a value of service in the school or within the immediate community, they're going to call ACS. They're going to make a report, right? And so you have young people who are not willing to talk because anything they say can be used against them. That may become problematic when they're just trying to find solutions to situations that are not as harmful, but it's part of our culture. And so I think that it goes back to, what does community look like? Who's respecting that community? How do we define it? And once we start looking at that, it's important to start putting practices in place. And sometimes it's not going to come from the money from government or donations, because we're in a time and place that's not happening. We, the people, have to save our people.
Yeah, I think Chris brings up an interesting point, and Dr. Lopez, you spoke to it also. I think there's obviously a much larger shift in society around, our economics and, gentrification that happens in, many of our big cities now, and how gentrification, can literally change the way that a community and neighborhood is set up and functions, right? And so for some of our large urban school districts, for my time, I spent time in San Francisco and in Oakland, and in our large district systems, it was, most of our educators came from outside of the city. They didn't live in the same neighborhoods, right? And that's a challenge. And I know, and when you have teachers that are, I'm not knocking teachers, I'm just saying they're coming in, they don't understand the community. They get to go home at night to a different community. They're not going to see the kids on the corner, at the grocery store, at the laundromat. And I think the same goes too for policing. Like, I'm not anti-police. However, I believe in community policing. And when you have, a police force that, Oakland was a great example of this, where like 80 or 90% of the police in Oakland did not live in the city. So they have no actual connection to the people that they're supposed to be, quote unquote, serving and protecting, right? And I think when we look at educational outcomes, and we look at behavioral data in schools, and we look at policing and criminalization, Black and brown boys, are definitely like overrepresented across the board. So I think, these are things that definitely were not brought up as part of this Scott Galloway's latest podcast tour, what do we call it? But that's why we're talking about it here. Dr. Cole, welcome to the show.
What's going on? I've been listening off and on as I was traveling to the hotel. So happy that we have our two esteemed guests. I couldn't not be here because Chris was going to be like, you don't ever invite me. And the one time you invite me, you're not here. So I will catch up where I need to catch up. But I've been listening to the combo. I'll get in where I fit in.
Great. Jubilee, you want to speak to that first part before we transition?
I don't. My mind is still reeling. I'm thinking about my babies, And, so that's my lens today, like as educator and mother. But I do want to highlight this comment. It's interesting from the Movement One that says it's not a race thing or an urban thing. All males at all levels and all races, all areas are doing worse than women, especially in education.
Okay. Yeah. I think when we look at educational, again, we look at educational outcomes. We look at poverty indicators, health indicators. We look at criminalization, over policing, access to male role models. I will say not across the board, but generalizing here, like Black and brown boys, are typically on the receiving end, and we know that according to the data. So. Let's focus there. And I'm coming to this, not just as a former educator and a school leader, but also as a parent of a 14-year-old boy. And I know, I see the world, I see the way that the world is accepting him and or rejecting him. So, like, you can read research, you can listen to podcasts, you can read books, you can read articles, you can watch the news. But then you have like this real experience in your home when you see, what the impact is. When you know your child, right? No child is perfect, but you see the way in which the world is kind of like pushing back and like rejecting. And so, preparing to have those conversations, and that was one of the impetus for having this show with you all here today. So next question is, let's turn to talk about, solutions. I mean, we know we've identified what some of the problems are, but like what's actually working, for Black and brown boys. We could talk about what's happening in community, what's happening in homes, what's happening in our school systems. What is actually working? What stories do we have to lift up, where we actually are seeing success?
So I'll speak from a place of having opened a school. So my mantra when I was in the thick of things was I opened a school to close a prison, because I understood that communities like Brownsville, where my school was located, was part of the $1 Million Block Club. And it wasn't necessarily for the $1 Million blocks of what the value of the houses, but the bodies of those who ended up in the incarceral system, right? And so it was easy for my boys to identify with incarceration as just the rites of passage. Like, that's what we do, right? It gives you street cred. It is generational. It's the thing that we do. And so I had to help them realize that it's not something you have to do, right? Like it's not supposed to be your birthright. That's not your birthright. And it was often hard, because initially, when I opened the school, I created My Brother's Keeper in 2010. And I remember asking men to participate in just coming in and saying, listen, this idea came to me, My Brother's Keeper. And the first thing they said was like, how long I got to be there? Like, what you need, right? And I was just like, it's just 2 hours. It's not that long. I'm not asking for blood. And they would come, people who are high position in leadership, who are going to come take photos with the kids. And then there were those who were invested. But the turnout was not nearly as high when it came to the girls, right? Like, if I had a girls event, I had 300 people. Women were coming in droves. They were bringing their sisters, aunties. Everyone was coming. And so the boys used to see that it was only like 20, 30, 40 men and the young men who were there. And they were like, why are we coming to this? The girls got more folks, right? So I ended up saying by 2014, I believe that was when the case against George Zimmerman, he wasn't found guilty. And it was the summertime, and there was a 1-year-old who was killed, Antique Hennis. His dad was unfortunately connected. It was gang affiliation. And they shot this 1-year-old in the head. And it was a block away from the school. And not one person came. We had summer programming to ask if we were okay, to ask if our young people were okay, right? Because now our boys are all on alert, because it could be them next. And I sat with the men on my team and I said to them, how do we know that our boys matter? How do they know that when outside of just getting home safe, that they actually matter to the world, right? Because some of them are getting home and no one's saying, I love you. No one's giving them the hug. No one's giving them the kiss in the morning. No one's saying, baby, I want you to be great, and I can't wait to see you when you get home. That's not it, right? So how do they know that they matter? And then immediately I said, I don't think we should call it My Brother's Keeper anymore. I think we need to call it I Matter. Because at the end of the day, there's not always going to be somebody who's going to be able to keep our boys, but they need to know that they matter. So how do we teach them to have self-esteem, to know that they have self-worth, to know that they are of value, even in a world that doesn't want to see them free? And so immediately when we changed it to I Matter, and I decided to make it into a cohort where we literally took all of the 8th graders and 7th graders throughout Brownsville, and we brought them together in a community that was outside of where we were located, because there were so many gang affiliations. Once they're off grounds, we went to a college. The same young men who were friends when they were in 3rd and 4th grade, who were now opposing teams, got a chance to let down their guard, got a chance to not identify with the colors that was associated with the streets, and got to connect, right? And then out of nowhere, we went from 30, 40 to 250 boys and men. People were showing up. They were having conversations like they would in the barbershop. They were talking about ways in which they had to navigate systems and how they needed to show up and how they needed to know that they were valuable, all the things that was required. And the thing that was great about it is that I created the space, but I didn't interrupt the space. So the same way I said to Chris, like, I want you to go first, is because we have to also honor and give our men the space to be in these places, because even the system itself will create so many barriers that don't allow men to just come in and volunteer their time, right? And so it was important to do that, and every young man would have to repeat, I matter. And so did the men. And so off of that, we got volunteers. People were just coming in. They just wanted to come to the school. They just wanted to donate their time. And so that was really important. And it was important for the educators. I didn't care what color they were. They had to be involved and see how young men can gather, how they can be respectful, because they're always like, they're so defiant, they're so this, they're so that. But are you creating this safe space that they need in your classrooms? Are you honoring who this person is, right? And so that changed the game, and that changed the dynamic, because then those boys can go back into their respective spaces. And even if they know they're going back into their respective spaces and are still connected to, let's say, gang affiliation, they remember that person that they saw at, off site, and it broke the tension. Like, the question becomes like, so why are y'all against each other? Who created that? Right?
Yeah.
And so I'm saying all of that to say this: we have to create the spaces, right? We have to go back to that, because it is very intentional. When I tell you, the bullying is real with our boys in a different way. Like, anytime one of my young men would get a haircut, I would brace myself, because I used to stand outside and greet them. And as soon as I saw a haircut, I would grab the child and I'd be like, do me a favor, I'm gonna walk downstairs with you. Or I would have him go upstairs, because I knew immediately the boys would like pinpoint him. And the first thing they do is start smacking him behind the head, right? And so what does that make him feel like? I don't want to get a haircut. I don't want to get a haircut. So the barbershop no longer becomes a place of gathering and a sacred space. It becomes, after I leave here, when I go to school, it's going to be a problem. Right? Yeah. So just we have to create those spaces and honor our boys and our men.
Thank you for that. Yeah, especially and it's something that I often thought about working in schools, where you might have a mixed match between educator backgrounds and the background of the communities that they work in, and just recognizing, honoring, and uplifting the humanity of every single young person in the building, right? If we do nothing else, right? And that's not a technical challenge. That's a spiritual challenge for so many people. So, yeah, I heard that in your comments. Thank you for that. Jubilee, looks like you got something ready to go here.
I was about to write some notes. No, you guys got me thinking. When you were saying we're thinking about solutions, I'm like, mentorship, right? So where Nadia went, it's like where my mind is going. Like, it works, right? When we're intentional about having it in communities. But then my mind went to thinking about some things I've experienced since I've moved, to the DMV, where there are more wealthy Black men, more educated Black everything down here. And thinking about me being a single mom with my sons, 14 and 15 going on 16, and struggling to find mentors, right? Or struggling to find mentorship groups that don't use academia as an entry point, right? Like, if you want to be a part of this, mentorship, you have to have a 3.5. And my sons do well in school, right? But I just think about like barriers. One, just around availability or willingness, and then two, about these different criteria that are used and create more of a barrier than like a welcoming, like, you're safe here. Because I do think, to Chris's first point where he mentioned like the sense of belonging, I think that changes everything for a young man, right? Like everything. I am sure that some young man that I taught or was, you know, a school leader of years ago, like didn't go to jail because some of them did end up incarcerated, right? And that's just a part of it when you work in places like me and Nadia worked, right? And probably all of us worked, right? But like, I am sure that a young man did not commit suicide or end up incarcerated because we had community circle, because we had morning meeting, because we had check-ins, because we had one-on-ones. Like, how are you really? Like, I do see this BS that you're doing. I did see you, the way you was talking to your teacher was a little crazy. And let me help you understand why. And let me hear your side, right? Because that's the other thing too. Like, to Nadia's point, we're talking about a sense of belonging, but we're also talking about safety, especially in an environment where Black young men and Black men are demonized just for existing. You must have done it. You must have said it, right? I got on an educator at my son's school because she called my son a disrespectful child, a rude little child. And I was like, no, ma'am. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. You need to find new words, and you need to understand you're talking to a young Black man who has a Black mom, and you need to rephrase that shit. Right? Because words are powerful. Mm-hmm. And you were being annoying. And she was like, I was being annoying. Yeah, you were. And so these children, these young men, right? They are human beings. And I think part of creating an environment where there's a community or sense of belonging is identifying that, right? And removing the barriers and ensuring that we are creating space that is welcoming, and space that says I matter, space that says I see you. And not only do I see you, but I'm going to shut up and I'm going to listen, right? Because I think long term, like when I look back, I'm thinking some of these young men, they just don't get listened to. You're home, maybe you're not listened to. You come to school, ain't nobody listening. You go outside, you fearing for your life. You just don't want to get picked up by the cops. Like, these are realities. Mm-hmm. So where exactly am I safe? You know, so I'm tooting the horn for creating communities and ensuring that there's a sense of belonging and being intentional about it. And mentorship works, but I do think that we need more folks who make themselves available and, you know, show that they're willing to mentor young Black men and brown men.
So what I'm getting so far from this discussion is that maybe Mr. Galloway was wrong. Maybe it's not just that video games are the problem, right? It's larger systemic issues that are impacting our young men. We have one more big question that we want to move into, but I wanted to just take a couple of minutes to see if there was anything else that, you know, anybody had that wanted to put on the table. Charles, we haven't heard from you.
I don't know if Chris got to answer that question either. I was going to go after our guest if it was still an open question.
You know, the only thing that I would add in listening to all of that is that what kids do with their time is very important. And, you know, time is our enemy in a lot of cases. Empty time is really our enemy. Like, where there's time where you don't have any money and there's nothing to do, that is a problem in childhood. And it's a problem for a couple of reasons. Number one, the things that you do find to do are not always positive. But I'm thinking about this study that came out not too long ago. 50CAN studied something like 20,000 families, something like that. It was a very large data set. And they were trying to figure out a correlation to high grades in schools. And it turned out that participation in extracurriculars was the one correlate to high grades and low grades. And guess what was the correlate to participation in extracurricular things? It was money, right? So if you're a middle class or upper middle class, your kids are involved in a lot of things. They're involved in a lot of things. They're going to a lot of places. They're doing a lot of stuff. And each one of those things costs money. As a parent who has a kid in dance and one in lacrosse and one who thinks that he's going to be a music producer, you know, it costs money to do things like this camp you want to go to, these things you want to participate in. And you have to think about the fact that there are young people who have none of that, right? Who have very limited access to anything. And then we get on to them about the entertainment stuff that they want to participate in or they want to consume. But of course they want to consume those things because what the hell else is there to do, right? Like, oh, you shouldn't play video games. Really? I shouldn't play video games. I shouldn't get on social media. I shouldn't have a phone. I shouldn't do any of those things. So what I'm going to do? Sit in my room and just look at the wall, right? Like, and just stare at the wall and feel broke and hungry. Like, what am I supposed to do, right? Boredom will kill people. Like, boredom is a thing, and it's a problem. It's a cancer of activity. And my only whip around to what's a solution to that is there needs to be a little. Charles talks about agency all the time. I want to talk about different kind of agency, civic agency, where you are putting pressure on the decision makers who create the structures in which our families live in. And we started talking about schools, but here's the thing. We have to have heat for everybody. What you have to ask mayors, what is your budget for children within your jurisdiction? What is there to do in this city? Why are they paying money to go to zoos and to museums and to programs when you are a whole mayor in a whole city? I want to see what your budget is. Oh, you don't have one? Okay, guess what? Next time somebody runs, we're going to hit them with the same question, and they better have an answer for us, right? So it's your school board, it's your mayor, it could be anybody that wants your vote. Everybody has to have a child policy. And part of that policy has to be opening up roads to opportunity. I don't know why I would go to some cities and so many things don't cost much, and then go to another city and there's a barrier to entry on most of the educational opportunities in that city. Time. We got to close. Oh, let me add one more because this is my favorite one. Listen, I don't even know I should say this, but I'm going to say it too. There are too many institutions with closed doors every day. And the number one that I care about is the church, right? Churches with closed doors during the day, I get the economics. The economics have changed for churches. I get that. But you can't be all up in a community and open on Sundays, right? Like that, you know, that is an important institution that can create some capacity for young people to have something else to participate in. But then, you know, everything else, sports, educational opportunities, things to be involved in something that take up your time is to me, I think, very important.
Can I just steal some of your can I steal some of your heat, Chris?
Yes, please.
It's that heat for everybody. But it also has me thinking about family, right? Like I grew up, my parents didn't have a lot of money or what have you, right? And this is something that when I was principal, I used to share with my families as well, right? Your presence is more than $1 million, right? And I think there is something to be said to families about that. And I get it, right? One person with 11 jobs, right? Like you just can't do all the things. I get it. But do you have 10 minutes to tell Malik that he's brilliant and beautiful? Do you have 6 minutes to be like, where your homework at, right? How was your day? Like, do you have 3 minutes to just check in real quick? Because that 3 minutes to a young Black man could mean, you know, the world in a world where it feels like you're just battling everything and everybody. So that's what I used to tell my families. Like, you may not be wealthy and have all the things, but if you have time, then you have more than money as it relates to being a present and a positive force in your child's life. And we need to be able to leverage that as families too. So we have some accountability there as well.
Yeah,
I would think. Go ahead, Charles.
Oh, go ahead, David. It's your show, brother. I don't want to, you know, you got it.
I think this thing of extracurriculars is very interesting that Chris put out there, because, you know, you have, like, if you have a city and you have a school district that kind of, like Oakland is a good example. You have the city boundary and you have a school boundary, a school district boundary. You have a superintendent, you have a mayor, you have all this public land where all of this where programming happens, and more of it used to happen. But yet there's so many like athletic fields in a city like Oakland, even in the city that I'm in, that's like, is this a city or is this a school district property? Why are the gates closed after hours? Why are the gates closed on the weekends? Access to free athletic opportunities, not just for boys, but for girls too, is increasingly rare until the time that you get to high school. And then it tends to be very competitive. And that's a barrier in and of itself. You don't want to go in, you know, your 9th grade year and get your butt kicked on the baseball or softball field, right? So we have to find ways. There are like cities like Baltimore, even cities like Oakland, cities like San Diego, figuring out ways to integrate, not just pay for programming, but actually, like, you know, using sometimes private, sometimes public funding to provide access to a manner as early as elementary school, scaling up in middle school, and then obviously accelerating in high school. Since COVID, the cost of participating in competitive club systems, focusing on the Bay Area, average of like $4,000 to $10,000 per year per child to play club sports outside of school, right? That's a barrier right there, right? So, anyhow.
Yeah, I was gonna say some of the things that you said. You asked what's working. I think I think strong male-led spaces, like especially where male bonding, adult like friendships, platonic relationships are being like on like display. Really important for young boys to see how men should interact with each other. And I think having those spaces led by men, I think it's really, really, really important. I think those things, those subtleties matters. You need all that different energy exposure, but like in some of these, you need men kind of leading them. And I think also in those spaces, acknowledging that boys need help with no Trojan horses. And what I mean by that is usually anytime if you're trying to do something for Black boys or brown boys, that you have to include everybody, or it has to, if you're talking about Black boys, let it be about Black boys, not boys of color. If it's a space for brown boys, it's a space for boys. Or if we're focusing on boys, that's not the time where we need to talk about what's happening to the girls. We have those spaces. And if I go into a space that's supposed to be focused on girls and do that, is deemed disrespectful, but it's often not deemed that same way when it happens in the reverse. I think the other things too, when we talk about working, you all touched on it, but I think even naming it is really trying to drill down and understand why sports, military, and gangs work with boys more than other different things. What do those things have in common? What are the characteristics? There's some type of discipline. There's some type of goal. There's some type of place where you get to have some valor or win or things like that. It allows some of the primitive nature that boys have to like not be demonized, like which tends to kind of happen a lot in these conversations now. Like when boys are growing up hearing that everything about them is toxic or everything about them is a problem, it can confuse you. And also much love and respect to Galloway, but respectfully, Galloway is talking to his people. He is talking to a plurality of people. White people still make up a large chunk of folks. He's not talking about Black boys and brown boys. He's talking about the issue with white boys. He's talking about the issue with the plurality of people who he is. And I think there are some valid things, but I think as David, Chris, Dr. Lopez, and Jude all pointed out, there are some systemic things that's hitting some of these other races, some of these other type of kids in other ways. And I also think when we talk about the problem of Black boys, we tend to have this vision of poor, poverty-driven hood Black boys. Like, no. Black boys across the board. There are middle-class Black boys. There are upper-class Black boys. There are lower-class Black boys, but they're all seeming to struggle in similar ways. So like really having true and honest conversations around that and not letting other groups that mean them harm use them as placards and placeholders for them to get funding and other things when they have no real intention of really supporting and working with those boys.
I just want to build on one point that you made there. First of all, I agree with everything. But the one point I want to build on about Galloway, just to reify the point that you just made, he is talking about a group of young men who are failing in a society that was constructed for
that's built for them, right?
So they still failing.
Bingo.
In a society that was built for them, with them in mind, tailored to their development. So I understand why they're mad. I get why they're mad. The world was meant for you and designed for you, and you
still can't win.
Okay, I would be mad too. Right? I'd feel some kind of way about that too. So the person who said earlier in the comments that, it's not a race thing. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I'm sorry, I hate to inform you. Absolutely, all data in the United States is. Empirically, it is true that there is a difference between what our children are experiencing based on their economic and their racial background. It is a race thing, right? So I get the anger within the white community. Hell, if I was failing in the system that was made for me, I'd be mad too.
You mean the system was made for Chris Stewart and you still didn't win?
Personally, it had my name on it, like my name on
Dr.
it, right?
Lopez, we built this specifically. We built this dress just for you, and it don't fit. I got a problem. I got an issue.
If when
you muted, Dr. Lopez, you muted.
I'm blaming everybody. You know my needs. You failed me. I know there's a question to be asked, but I do want to point. There's two touch points and then a major point that needs to be said. So one of the things that we did for me that was really important, that I think that is really important in our community, is that we need to teach each other the hacks. right? We need to teach each other the hacks of how to do things on a string budget, because this is consistent, right? Us not having enough funding, this has been happening for a long time. And if there was one thing that I did, was I figured out how to penny pinch. I figured out how to rob Peter to pay Paul. I figured out how to leverage all of my networks to make sure that the kids had something. Because I understood when Chris talked about when they're not busy and they're not doing something, they will find something to do that's going to be a problem. Okay. And so our school was open from 8 o'clock in the morning. They got there at 7:30 because they had breakfast. And it's not a charter school. And we were open till 6:30 every day, Monday through Friday. And then we had Saturday programming. So they had track and field. They had varsity basketball, JV. How you have that in middle school? We had it. We had softball. We had photography, music production. We had like a litany of programs for the kids. And then the summertime, because I was always fearful of the summer is too hot, the kids have nothing to do, that's the worst time ever. We had a program that was for 5 weeks, 8:30 to 3 o'clock. This was before Summer Rising, right? Because I knew that if they didn't have anything to do, I did not want to turn on the TV and see that there was a problem. The second thing is to bring awareness. We would take the kids on the train, 6 stops away from Brownsville, whole nother neighborhood, and the kids would see like how they got restaurants. Like Chinese restaurants wasn't plexiglass that you sitting here talking about, can I get French fries? There were menus. There was tables. There was someone greeting you, right? You come back to Brownsville, you don't have that. You have someone who's in your neighborhood yelling at you to get out, hurry up, order your food, right? So then the kids would meet with the elected officials and say, so how come when we went to Park Slope or we went to Prospect Heights, you have restaurants? We don't have restaurants. How come when we leave our neighborhood, there's a whole bunch of people standing on the corner and they don't have like job training, but we go to the other neighborhood and they're all at like eateries and they're sitting outside with computers. Like what's the difference? I'm not going to ask the question. I'm going to empower the young people to be aware of there's a difference between your community. But the other thing is that what we need to be mindful of is how many of our Black and brown boys are in special education, because they are considered defiant. They are considered dangerous. They are considered not on grade level. And the reality is that you have a bunch of young people who are energetic, who are rambunctious, who don't like sitting for 45 minutes. Adults don't like sitting for 45 minutes. Half of the time we on our phones texting each other when we're supposed to be focused on a meeting that's connected to our work, right? And then you got 45 minutes or 90-minute blocks. And because they're moving around and they're not focused, they have ADHD, you maybe should take it to the doctor, they need to get diagnosed. Then you setting up the paperwork. I used to tell the teachers, oh, I need evidence. You have to prove to me why you're saying this young man needs to be in special education, because you're trying to put him in a place. You're not putting him in a classroom where he's engaged, he's bored. Or maybe he's not on grade level and you're not recognizing that. And now you're blaming him for what failed him before he got here. I literally sat in a class one day and I watched this young man create these Freddy Krueger nails. Like he sat there in 5 minutes. He had the whole thing and he was, right? He had done his work. The teacher asks for the kids to answer the question. He raises his hand. She ignores him. She ignored him because she said, you're sitting there and you're messing around in class and you're not focusing and blah, blah, blah. And I said, but he did the work. And he actually wasn't bothering anybody. And for him to have done that with regular paper in 5 minutes, the boy got talent. So I took him out the classroom. I was actually there to observe. I was just there to observe. I took the young man out and I said, tell me about why you made these little contraptions for your hand. He was like, because I have nothing else to do. And I know I could get in trouble. So I just wanted to sit there. And he was like, and then I just started. And I said, well, where did you get the idea from? He was like, I don't know. I just envisioned it. And then I started doing with the paper. I said, that's engineering. He said, what? I said, you engineered something. You actually created it. I said, you're very creative, you're artistic. And I want you to know that you can take this talent and turn it into something. But I also want you to know when you're sitting in a classroom to be very mindful that this teacher may not think that you're as intelligent as everybody else. And sometimes we have to recognize and we have to tell the adult after the class. I said, after the class, I want you to tell her, I had all of the answers. I want you to check it for me. And the reason why I did that is because I had nothing else to do. Is there something I could do in the meantime? Because I had to give him the agency so that he could direct and let her know I did the work. I actually did something so I wouldn't get in more trouble. But what I said to the person that I was with when I was observing, I said, I'm watching the school to prison pipeline end up in this classroom. Because what she just did was dim the light of that young man. And he's going to be hearing that in other classes. And he's in 6th grade. By the time he gets to 7th grade, he's going to mute himself. And you know when the scores go down for our young men? 4th and 7th grade. You know how they build the prisons? 4th and 7th grade. So this young man who has the potential of being an engineer, who could do robotics, who could construct something, now feels like I shouldn't because this teacher has said to him no and has ignored him. And we sat in there, we watched it. That's a problem. So, these are the things that we have to be mindful of because they will categorize us and say that we belong in these spaces. And you have brilliant young men who end up in prison. And when they have time to read books that they enjoy, when they have time to engage in conversations in the huddle, right? Now they can walk out with degrees, but they should have been able to get all of that while they were home in our classrooms, in our community, before they go to those places where they get the opportunity to engage in things that would be feeding their souls instead of us depriving them of it.
One point I want to pick up on that is that kids, young people, they get messages all day long, every day. They're always learning something. I had an elder once tell me, stop saying our kids aren't learning. Our kids are always learning. They're learning all the time. They might be learning what you want them to learn, but they're learning something all the time. And that got me to thinking about the messages that Black boys get in kindergarten and 1st grade and 3rd grade. And the more I looked at it, there's a lot of, you could be given the best messages at home, but you're fighting an uphill battle if you're raising Black boys because they walk out the door after you've given them all these good messages. Maybe you inoculated them against what they're going to hear outside in the world, but maybe you haven't. And one way for me that this really comes home that's different based on money, based upon middle class, Charles, like what you said, 50% of our kids are in the suburbs now. It don't mean that they're having like the time of their life out there in the suburbs, but they are living in different existences now. But the ones who aren't, I heard you say a couple of times there, Doc, about like the school to prison pipeline. And I stopped saying that years ago after visiting so many schools, because I said, this is more like the school prison nexus. They're actually in the same place. Now you walk in some of these schools, they got detectors, they got all kinds of things that you're answering questions left and right. You're like unpacking things, you're pulling stuff out your pockets, what? And what, that's a message.
Well, in Chicago, you have to have a clear backpack. So many of the schools,
and
backpack need to be clear.
That is a message to a young person. I am not safe here. And I am partially being treated as the enemy versus they get on buses and go play a football team out in the suburbs. And everything looks like Disneyland in some ways, right? They're like, oh, this is how y'all living out here, huh? Oh, nice field you got there. Oh, you got lights on your field after 6? Oh, wow. Okay, this is nice. This is nice. No metal detectors, no checking my backpack, no emptying my pockets, no asking me, like being in the hallway in between classes. I dare somebody to give my child a hard time about having to go to the bathroom during the day, right? But in some schools, that can be a real problem. I mean, very much a real problem. Such a problem that you have people getting 504 plans just to write stuff in the plan saying my kid gets to go to the bathroom when they want to go to the bathroom.
I believe that.
That's a message in itself. That is teaching you something. Just that by itself is a message.
Compliance, right?
Compliance. You're the enemy, and you're not safe.
Yeah. So we're pretty much up on time, but I want to offer just one quick go around just to kind of close out. We had another question, but we can just maybe an aspiration that you have, a change that you would like to see, or just something that you want to reflect on from this show. And I'll go first quickly here. When I first started my education journey as an educator 25 years ago, I was a very different person than I was now. And I was a hardened educator. I was a very and I moved into administration, and the kids used to call me, my last name is Castillo. They used to call me Mr. Castigo, Mr. Punishment. And it was a joke, but it really wasn't a joke. We were running schools during the no excuses era, right? Mm-hmm. And we got results, but there were costs associated with that. So what that looked like at the human level was that I would observe some of my teachers and educators, which they taught me, how to do these things. I didn't understand it at the time, but we would enroll students that had, criminal backgrounds. They're part of gangs. I grew up in gangs. But I think growing up, nobody ever really sat down to talk to me about what was going on or what I was experiencing or what I was feeling. And so I carried that through my adult years. And when I came into education, I still carried that. And I couldn't turn that corner as an educator. It took me a while, and then eventually becoming a parent, to really understand it's not a one size fits all, and I saw educators work with some of the quote unquote hardest students, right? Just known gang members in the community, and got them to a point where they were just young men, young boys, and they could talk freely and open up, right, in small groups and advisories. I was like, wow, that's some special sauce right there. And I learned from that. And then, eventually becoming a parent, of a young man who's now 15, I'm still on that journey, as a father, as a mentor, to learn how to provide space for young people, for young men, even in my own home. It's not easy. It's a challenge. And so I think for my closing thought, I just want to, I want to put out the message that whether you work in schools, whether you're a parent, you're a community member, you work in the church, you work in a barbershop, whatever your role is, and you work with young people, you engage with young people, every young person has a story. And it's really critically important for us to create space for them to tell their stories and to recognize their own individual, unique humanity. That's it. I'm going to end on that, and I'll let you all, we can do a quick go around before we close the show out.
Who are you throwing the two hosts?
You.
Okay, sounds good. I'll go really, one, appreciations to our esteemed guests, and apologies y'all for being late. I'm traveling right now. There was a time, quick story, but I think it encapsulates this conversation and my appreciation. I'm going to start by saying, it's okay if you didn't have tools then, and as you get more tools, don't shit on people that might not have the same tools as you. And it's this story of one of my friends and how I watched him deal with his son. His son did something, it wasn't a super big mistake, but it was like an integrity thing where I think his son didn't try hard enough or a little fib. It was something integrity based. And he was talking to his son, and we were all there. It was like it wasn't our book club. It was like it was none but black men. We were watching the game or something. And he said, hey, you need to come out and tell your uncles what you did. One, I didn't know I was an uncle, but two, and he kept going. He said, anytime you do something great, all these brothers here, all these uncles here show you love and praise you. And now you had an integrity issue. So now with that same glee, you need to look at these men and tell them what you did. And we need to deal with it. So he starts talking, he drops his head. His dad is like, don't drop your head. You didn't drop your head when you did it. Lift your head up, look these men in the eye and say what you did. And then afterwards, we listened and, we gave him slight pushes, but it was a lot of love, right? And in that moment, so much stuff happened for, I think, all the men in that room. Because one, our fathers and none of those other dads, we never had those kind of tools. Two, I didn't know the impact. That impacted me watching it. And so thinking about doing this with a 13-year-old boy who's getting so many lessons without he not getting yelled at, he not getting hit, he not getting cussed out, but he sees at the same time both love, accountability, and community, and how men are supposed to operate in that moment. And I just wanted to just leave with that story because we talked about some things that could feel untouchable to the reader or the listener, to somebody that's watching us. And it's it's the system and it's money. This ain't cost no money. This is how you build actual community, and you actually love a child while holding him accountable and letting him know that no matter what he did, we got you. We have a standard for you, but you still always got a home, and you got a home with nothing but these men. I'm not coddling you. I'm not telling you, something that's not true. I just thought it was a beautiful moment. I thought it was appropriate to share it here.
Jubilee, and then we'll finish off with our guests. Thank you, Charles.
Sure. So yes, Charles, thank you. So 3 things. I'm thinking commitment, of course, to my beautiful Black brilliant sons, my beautiful young kings, to my leaders, those that I coach, because I'm always thinking about, the why, and that's children, right? Especially Black and brown children, and then community. So I say my sons because my sons, they keep me grounded because this is their current lived experience, right? So I learn a lot just by paying attention to what the heck they doing and why they doing it. And so I learn a lot. So that's part of my commitment. It keeps me on my toes, to see what their language is and how they're evolving as human beings in this world. And then secondly, to my leaders, because example, last week I visited a school, and I passed these 2 young Black and brown men that were sitting out in the vestibule, like in the lobby. I'm like, what y'all doing out here? They were, I think maybe 1st grade or 2nd grade, kneeling in the chair, rambunctious, all the things. Oh, we got kicked out of the classroom. Kicked out of the classroom. What are we saying here? And so later on in the day, I ended up participating in a leadership team meeting, right? And one of the, leaders did ask for feedback. And when they were speaking about kind of high flyers and things that you want to pay attention to as the year's coming to a close, it's like, yeah, we want to make sure that if you're kicking kids out of the classroom, that you send them with work. I said, so when I'm observing, I don't be, trying to interject. I just sit there and just do my little note taking, just do my little listening, but I just couldn't let it fly. So I said, and usually I try to, lead by inquiry. Not this time. I said, can we not ever say kicking kids out of the classroom ever again in life between now and the rapture? Oh, okay, no kicking out. And it was literally inculcated. It is how they talk about when they tell little Johnny or little Malika, whoever, they ain't listening, get out. That's part of the school culture. Right, that has to be unearthed and needs to dissipate, honestly. Right. So anyway, so my commitment is to leaders because leaders go first. Leaders are the visionaries. Leaders create language, and other people follow suit based on what you are modeling. So some leaders somewhere, even if it wasn't those leaders in the room, modeled that and made that acceptable. Right. And so thank God for the influence, right, and the expertise that I have, where I'm able to say, okay, the buck stops here. We need to eradicate that. That's not healthy. And look who was in the vestibule in the lobby. It was two boys, a brown boy and a Black boy, right? So that's that. And then thirdly, I think about my community. So I relocated I relocated to Bowie, Maryland, from Brooklyn, New York, the only borough that matters. Okay. Okay. You know how I feel about this. But anyway, so I've always been, I served in Title I schools, lived in the hood, all the things. Now I'm not living in the hood, but some of these problems still exist, maybe even more so now, right? And we have an amusement park around here. I see the headlines all the time, right? Where the kids are going to the amusement park to fight. They're filming it. They're putting it on social media. Kids going in droves. And these people, they family got money. Right. But they're going to fight in droves. They're jumping this one, jumping that one. So my heart is always with whatever community I'm in. My heart is there because I'm like, damn, like, what is it that we can do to create more spaces to give you stuff to do? Right. Because there are young Black and brown men that are getting arrested from doing this kind of stuff because there's not enough to do in the community. Even a community that is wealthy, even a community that's well-to-do, is still a problem of access to meaningful activity, So those are my 3 commitments to Black and brown men.
Thank you. We'll go to Dr. Lopez, and then Chris will close this out.
So quickly, I say to all my educators, children need love. They need safety, and they need a sense of belonging. So they need to be assured that they are in a space of all those 3 things. The second thing is that you need to take time to listen. be an active listener and don't always make assumptions. That giving a child 2-3 minutes to just ask them the question of, are you okay? Is there some way I can be assist, or finding out why they did something that they did, allows them the time to build with you, but an opportunity to share, right? And it doesn't happen overnight, but you got to be consistent with it, because there's so much that our young people are holding in. And we know we come from a community of what happens in the house stays in the house. And so it's important to create that safe space. And then the last thing is that educators always have to center humanity. Our children are demonized enough, and we need to humanize their experiences, because they're seen as threats and not as powerful human beings who are kings, who have the potential of being amazing and great, because it's already in them. They have the potential. We need to make sure it comes out of them. So rather than dim their light, be the one to shine it on the pathway of where they need to go.
Love that. Chris Stewart.
See, the problem with going last is that everybody else, that's the problem. And Jubilee, I'm going to say this to you. They need to stop saying kick kids out of class even after the rapture, because they're going to still be here. So,
Jesus.
So I just want to make sure we put that out there. Even after the rapture, they need to stop saying that.
Wow. You just banish people to hell and purgatory. My Lord.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Y'all
YouTube channel's gone.
not going with Jesus when he come back.
No, because you kicking kids out of the classroom. Like, who does that?
With Jesus,
Man,
you can say kick kids out of the classroom.
If I didn't get to heaven and the Lord was like, could you kick the kid out of class? Oh, my Lord. I'm sorry, Chris. Please continue.
That's exactly what he's going to ask you.
I didn't kill nobody, but you kicked that boy out of class, you little bastard.
I think so much of what has been said already is really the thing. The only thing I would add is, as a Gen X parent, who's getting of the age where I think everything was better in my time, and blah, 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 whatever. I remember in the 70s, there was a culture surrounding us, telling us, I am somebody, I can achieve. It was played over and over and over again. There was things like Riff showing up with just free books. Reading is fundamental. Reading is fundamental. You heard these things from people coming out of people's mouths all around you. So there was a culture wrapped around me.
Pizza Hut. Oh, I'm sorry. I used to get free Pizza Hut.
Free pizzas.
The Pizza Hut book it challenge. That's what it was.
And if you sell these chocolate candies, listen, I wish one of these kids would knock on my door with the candy bars today, because I got money today now. So it's going to be your best day if you knock on my door with them candy bars right now. But my only point is there was a culture around us in the 70s and the 80s. So if you're a 70s kid versus an 80s kid versus a 90s kid, your parenting styles, I think, have changed based upon you're the sum total of your experiences. And it just was different for us, I think, especially before the 80s. 80s kids probably a little different parent than I am, right? And the culture around, we have some arguments to have. We have some cultural arguments to have around things like spanking and how we punish and when we punish, all those type of things. I won't get in that today. I don't want to open that up today. But the culture, the cultural part of that is conversations like that, dialogue like that. And then I also believe in community. You guys all said that today. Community is where you belong. So all the things that build community, invest in them. All the things that create community, invest in them. Start joining things. Start going to places. Start. Listen, you don't have to have a lot of money to leave the house. You don't have to have a lot of money. I was, my first one, he'll tell you, I was the king of free things. We were going every day somewhere because it was free, right? And then the last thing I'll say is I do believe opportunity is a structure. So like everybody knows, for instance, that like the wealthy get their kids very high quality early childhood learning experiences, but yet we're trying to cut Head Start, for instance, right? That's a structural change. These are structures of opportunity to learn early, to go to school prepared for school, to do well in kindergarten, first grade, and third grade. Middle school, Dr. Lopez, I heard you said middle school earlier. That is what all hell breaks loose in middle school. But guess what? In some of the richer schools, they've got extra kind of supports in middle school because they know that, right? Meanwhile, we're cutting those supports in the schools that our kids are in, right? Opportunity is a structure. You can see it in your mind. You can see a physical structure of what we're putting kids into, and that will change your politics. in my mind, that will change your politics about what you're voting for when you vote, because you don't see these things as policies anymore. You see them as the structures of opportunity and learning for our kids. So that's my final word. And I'm trying to get out of here for the rapture too. That's my final word.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Don't take
documented.
your kids
that
out of
you're
your
safe.
classroom or out of your house, and you'll be fine.
I'm trying to.
All right. Well, we are way over on time, so I want to definitely thank both of our esteemed guests for spending your. And we know you're both very busy individuals, and you've got responsibilities to take care of, and we appreciate your time. Hopefully, we made some new connections here today, and appreciate everybody bringing their thinking and their experience to this conversation about boys and young men, and being solutions oriented as well, and also recognizing that this is not a new issue. We've been here. We're still working on it. So, South Star Classroom, episode 186. Thanks everybody for joining us, and we will see you all next week. Peace.
Appreciate y'all. Thank you.